the night the clock stopped and everything began. The 11:47 to Westfield was the last train of the night. Eli Navarro knew this the way he knew his own heartbeat, instinctively, without having to think about it. He had taken that train every Thursday for the past 2 years, riding it home from his second job at the downtown print shop, his fingers still faintly stained with ink, his shoulders carrying the particular weight of a man who had learned to expect nothing extraordinary from his evenings. Tonight, he had almost made it. He heard the doors hiss shut when he was still 20 feet from the platform. He watched the tail lights of the last carriage shrink into the dark throat of the tunnel, swallowed whole. Gone. The warm rush of displaced air hit him in the face like a gentle, mocking farewell. For a moment he simply stood there, backpack over one shoulder, a half-eaten granola bar in his left hand, the kind of stillness around him that only exists in empty public spaces after midnight. The fluorescent lights above Platform 4 buzzed with a faint electrical hum, casting everything in that particular shade of pale yellow that made even the cleanest tiles look a little tired. Eli was 28 years old and deeply, profoundly exhausted, not just tonight. In general, in the way that accumulates quietly over years of working 2 jobs and living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment where the radiator clicked like a nervous habit every winter, in the way that comes from being the kind of person who always shows up for everyone else and secretly wonders when it will be his turn. He pulled out his phone. Dead. Of course it was dead. He'd meant to charge it at the shop. He'd meant to do a lot of things. There was a payphone at the far end of the platform. He'd noticed it before. The kind of artifact that felt almost archaeological now, but he had no change. And the thought of calling anyone at midnight to collect him made something in his chest feel tight and small and embarrassed. He sat down on the nearest bench. The station was called Alderton Cross, by the mid-sized commuter hub that transformed after the last service into something almost elegiac. The departure board still flickered with ghost schedules. A vending machine hummed in a far corridor. Somewhere, deep in the building's infrastructure, something dripped at steady intervals. Eli leaned his head back against the cold tile wall and looked up at the ceiling. Well, he thought, this is fine. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, 10 minutes. Maybe 15, before he heard footsteps. They were unhurried footsteps, deliberate. The footsteps of someone who belonged here, who owned this silence the way certain people own rooms simply by entering them. Eli turned his head. The man walking toward him was wearing the dark navy uniform of a station transit officer, pressed. Jacket with silver piping at the collar, a name badge catching the light. He was tall, with the kind of build that suggested he'd been an athlete once and had never quite let go of the habit. His skin was deep brown, his jaw clean-shaved, and he was carrying 2 cups of something hot in a small cardboard tray, which was not, Eli thought, standard procedure for a transit officer doing a late-night sweep. He stopped a few feet away. His eyes were dark and careful, and Eli noticed this before anything else. Kind. "You missed the 11:47, the man said. It wasn't a question. "I did," Eli confirmed. "Next service isn't until 5:15 a.m. "I know." A pause. The man looked at him with an expression that was both professionally neutral and somehow genuinely curious. "You planning to wait it out?" "Seems like my best option." The man looked down at the cups in his hand, then back at Eli. He seemed to be making a small internal calculation. Then he held one of the cups out. "Staff room has a kettle," he said. "I made too much." Eli blinked. "You made too much." "Tea," the man said with the absolute straightest face. It happens. Something unlocked in Eli's chest, small, like a single gear catching. And he almost laughed. Almost. He was too tired for a full laugh. But the corner of his mouth moved, and he reached out and took the cup. It was warm in his hands. The tea was real, strong, the kind brewed by someone who took it seriously. "Thank you," Eli said. The man sat down on the bench, not too close, not performatively far away, just at a natural, respectful distance. He held his own cup in both hands and looked out at the empty track. "Marcus," he said. "Eli." Neither of them added anything for a moment. They just sat there in the buzzing yellow light, two men sharing tea in an empty train station at midnight, and somehow, inexplicably, it didn't feel strange. It felt like exhaling. "You work around here?" Marcus asked eventually. "Print shop on Calder Street. Thursday late shifts." Eli turned the cup slowly in his hands. "You always bring tea to stranded passengers?" "Only the ones who look like they've had a long week." Eli glanced sideways at him. "Is it that obvious?" Marcus considered this with quiet seriousness, as though it were a real question deserving a real answer. "You've got ink on your left hand, a granola bar you forgot to finish, and you've been sitting in an empty station for 15 minutes without trying to call anyone. That suggests either you're very calm, or there's nobody you particularly want to call at midnight." The accuracy of this was so precise that Eli felt something in his expression shift, something he hadn't intended to show. "Both? Probably," he said. Marcus nodded slowly, as though this made complete sense. He didn't press it, didn't try to fill the honesty with reassurance or small talk. He just acknowledged it and moved on. That, Eli would think later, was the first thing that made Marcus extraordinary. The ability to hear someone without immediately trying to fix them. They talked. It started casually. The station, the route, what Westfield was like after dark. Marcus had been working this line for 3 years, the last 2 on the late shift by his own choice. He liked the quiet, he said. The way stations breathed differently when the crowds were gone. Most people think of transit as just movement, he said. Getting from A to B, but this, he gestured at the empty platform with his cup. This is what it actually is. Space, threshold, the place between where you were and where you're going, Eli looked at him. You've thought about this a lot, he said. Night shifts do that. Marcus smiled for the first time. It was a slow smile, considered like sunrise. Eli felt it somewhere in his sternum. He told Marcus about the print shop, about the smell of fresh ink and warm paper, about the elderly woman who brought her memoirs in every month to have a new chapter printed, about the strange intimacy of handling other people's words. Marcus listened the way some people read, thoroughly, without rushing. At some point, the granola bar got finished. The tea went cold, and neither of them noticed. The station settled deeper into its midnight self around them, the fluorescent hum becoming almost musical in its constancy. It was nearly 1 a.m. when Marcus said quietly, I need to do a platform check. You want to walk with me? Eli didn't hesitate. Yeah. They walked the length of the station together, past the closed ticket booths and the dark shop fronts, through the connecting corridor with its mosaic of local history tiles, out onto the overnight platform where the air was cooler and the city's distant sound arrived in low, gentle waves. Marcus checked doors and locks with the ease of long habit. But he didn't stop talking, and Eli walked alongside him with his hands in his jacket pockets. Watching this man move through his world, capable and unhurried and oddly, quietly luminous. When was the last time I talked to someone like this? Eli thought he couldn't remember. And that thought arrived with a sadness that surprised him, not a sharp sadness, but the soft, diffuse kind. The kind that has been there for a long time and only becomes visible in the presence of something better. Marcus paused at the far end of the overnight platform, looking out at the dark tracks. The city's orange glow sat low on the horizon. A few stars were visible in gaps between clouds. "I like this part of the shift," he said quietly, "when the last train's gone and the next one isn't here yet. The whole system is just resting." Eli stood beside him and looked out at the same darkness. Their shoulders were close enough that he could feel the warmth of Marcus's presence without touching. "Does it ever feel lonely?" Eli asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But I've learned the difference between lonely and alone. Alone can be all right. Lonely is about—" He paused, choosing carefully. "The absence of being seen." Eli turned to look at him. Marcus turned at the same moment, and their eyes met in the way they had not quite allowed before, directly, with duration. Something passed between them, wordless and specific. The kind of current that doesn't announce itself but can't be mistaken. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them looked away. There is a particular quality to the 2 a.m. hour that strips away pretense. Eli had read that somewhere once, in one of the books he kept on the nightstand, he never quite got around to properly decorating. He'd thought it was a romantic exaggeration at the time. Now, sitting in the Alderton Cross staff room on a plastic chair that had been there since approximately 1997, watching Marcus make a second round of tea with the focused ritual of someone for whom this was a genuine art form, he understood it completely. The staff room was small and warmly lit, a ceiling lamp with an actual warm-toned bulb, someone's improvement over institutional fluorescence. There was a corkboard dense with notices, a mini fridge with a handwritten Marcus's Milk, touch and die label that made Eli laugh properly for the first time in days, a small table and 2 mismatched chairs. On the windowsill sat a succulent in a terracotta pot and 3 paperback novels with cracked spines. Marcus had offered him the staff. Room when Eli's shivers became audible. Something Eli hadn't realized was happening until Marcus turned from the platform railing and said simply, "You're cold. Come inside." It wasn't romantic. It was practical. "And yet, you read on your breaks?" Eli asked, nodding at the books. "I read everywhere." Marcus set the mugs on the table and sat down. "It's the one thing my mother and I actually agree on." "What else do you disagree on?" A slight pause, the kind that holds weight. "Most things." He wrapped both hands around his mug. "She had a very specific idea of what my life was supposed to look like. I spent about 7 years trying to fit inside it before I stopped." Eli looked at him carefully. "How long ago was that?" 3 years. The timeline landed quietly between them. "The night shift," Eli said. Not accusing, just connecting dots. Marcus met his eyes. "The night shift," he confirmed. "There are things people say with spaces between words, entire chapters living in pauses." Eli understood, without needing it spelled out, that Marcus had chosen this particular solitude with intention. That this uniform, this quiet station, this world of thresholds and resting systems was not a retreat, but a reclamation. Eli recognized it. He had done his own version. "I came out at 23, Eli said, surprising himself. "To my family. It didn't go badly exactly." Nobody yelled. But there was this silence after, and then everything continued exactly as before, and I kept waiting for something to shift, and it never did. "They love me fine. They just never quite saw me." He stopped, aware he had said more than he intended. But Marcus was looking at him with that steady, unhurried attention, and the room felt safe in a way that rooms rarely did. And so Eli didn't reach for a deflection. "So you stopped waiting," Marcus said. "I stopped waiting," Eli agreed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then thoughtfully, "There's a kind of grief in that. Being loved in a way that misses you." Eli felt those words land somewhere precise and deep. He took a breath. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly it." Outside, the city murmured. A distant siren rose and faded. The fluorescent buzz of the corridor bled under the door. But inside the staff room, the light was warm, and the tea was strong. And the man across the table was looking at him as though Eli Navarro, ink-stained, granola bar-eating, missed the last train Eli Navarro, was something worth looking at. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him like that. "Tell me something good," Eli said, and he wasn't sure where the words came from, only that he needed something warm right now, and this man had been offering warmth since the moment he walked across that platform. Marcus thought about it seriously. "Okay," he said. "Last month, this couple, they must have been in their 70s, maybe older, came in on a Sunday. They'd met for the first time at this station 40 years ago, some kind of reunion trip. They asked me to take their photo on the platform, right where they'd first spoken." He paused, and the memory moved across his face. They held hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like 40 years was just nothing. Like time doesn't wear that down if it's real. Eli felt something press at the back of his eyes. He blinked it back. "That's a good one," he said. "I thought so." Marcus smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes fully, and Eli felt it like afternoon light through a window. They talked for another hour. About music, Marcus liked old soul. Eli had an inexplicable love for film scores. About food, Eli could cook one thing extraordinarily well, his grandmother's sofrito rice, and everything else embarrassingly badly. About the cities they'd thought about moving to and hadn't. About the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. About being gay in the in-between spaces, not in crisis, not in celebration, just in the daily quiet of it. The ordinariness and the weight that ordinariness sometimes carried. Marcus talked about a relationship that had ended 2 years ago, someone he had loved genuinely, who had wanted him to be smaller, quieter, easier. He said this without bitterness, only with the clarity of someone who has done the work of understanding. "I think I confused being chosen with being known," he said. "They're not the same thing." "No," Eli said softly. "They're not." Around 3 a.m., Marcus said he had to do one more platform walk, a scheduled check. He asked, again with that same simple directness, if Eli wanted to come. They walked the station a second time, but differently now. The silence between them had changed its texture. It was no longer two strangers' silence. It was something companionable, inhabited. Their footsteps fell into an easy rhythm. Their arms at their sides occasionally swung close enough that their knuckles brushed, and neither of them moved away. In the eastern corridor, Marcus stopped at the mosaic wall and held up his flashlight. The tiles told the history of Alderton Cross, old photographs rendered in ceramic, workers building the original station in 1887, families arriving in the post-war years, the gradual layering of community. "I love this wall," Marcus said quietly. Eli looked at it. All those people, all those arrivals and departures, all those lives passing through this same threshold. "Do you ever feel like you're part of it?" Eli asked. "Of the history of the place?" Marcus turned to look at him. The flashlight threw warm gold across his features. "Sometimes I think everyone who passes through here is part of it. Even the ones who just missed their train." Their eyes met in the corridor's warm dark. The space between them, Eli noticed, had been slowly, steadily narrowing all night, not through any deliberate choreography, but with the natural gravity of two people drawn toward each other. They were close now, close enough that Eli could see the faint lines at the corners of Marcus's eyes that appeared when he was thinking carefully, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "Marcus," Eli said. Yeah, Marcus said. Not a response exactly, more like an acknowledgement. I'm glad I missed the train. Marcus looked at him for a long, still moment. The city hummed its distant night song. The mosaic ancestors watched from their wall of tiles. I'm glad you missed it too, Marcus said. And then, slowly, with the unhurried deliberateness that characterized everything Marcus did, he reached out and tucked a strand of Eli's hair away from his forehead. It was a small gesture, barely anything. His fingertips barely grazed Eli's skin. It felt like a door opening. Eli closed his eyes for one breath. 2. When he opened them, Marcus was still watching him, and there was something openly tender in his expression now. The professional neutrality entirely gone. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Yes. Are you doing anything Saturday? Eli blinked. Then laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes up from somewhere and surprises even the person laughing. No, he said. I'm not. There's a farmer's market on Sinclair Road. Starts at 9. I'm off at 6. Marcus paused. I make very good sofrito rice, actually. You do not. I absolutely do. My grandmother is Dominican. I had no choice. Eli stared at him. Your grandmother is Dominican, and yours is Puerto Rican. They stood there in the tile-lit corridor looking at each other with the stunned, delighted expression of people who have just discovered an improbable overlap. We're going to argue about whose sofrito is better, Marcus said. We absolutely are, Eli agreed. And then, before either of them could say anything else, Marcus's radio crackled with a routine check-in call. He answered it with practiced efficiency, stepping slightly aside, his voice shifting back into the calm professionalism of his role. Eli watched him, this man who moved between worlds with such quiet grace, and felt something settle in his own chest, warm and certain. Something had shifted tonight. He could feel it in the way people feel weather changes before they see them. The 5:15 to Westfield appeared at precisely 5:13 a.m., early by a margin that felt almost symbolic. Eli saw the headlights first, 2 pale circles emerging from the tunnel's dark mouth, growing into the station with a low metallic sound that built gradually from silence into arrival. The platform lights responded automatically, flickering up to full brightness, and the departure board updated with a soft click. He was standing at the platform edge with his backpack over one shoulder. The early morning air carrying its distinctive quality, not quite night, not quite day. The sky through the station's high windows, a deep indigo beginning to lighten at its eastern edge. Marcus stood beside him. They had spent the last 90 minutes in a kind of suspended, luminous companionship, talking less by then, sitting together in the staff room while Marcus did his end-of-shift paperwork and Eli dozed lightly in the mismatched chair, waking to find Marcus watching him with an expression that he quickly readjusted into something more neutral, though not quickly enough. At 4:45, Marcus had made eggs. This detail felt important. Not romantic gesture eggs, not impressive date eggs, just competent, practical, this human needs breakfast eggs, scrambled in a small pan he kept in the staff room for long shifts, seasoned correctly, served on the one plate that didn't have a chip in it. Eli had eaten them and felt, with an almost overwhelming simplicity, cared for. When was the last time he had been cared for like this? Not enormously, not dramatically. Just noticed. Fed. Kept warm. He couldn't pinpoint it. And that absence, named at last, was its own kind of revelation. Now they stood on the platform as the 5:15 slowed into its berth and the doors announced themselves with a recorded chime. This is you, Marcus said. This is me, Eli agreed. Neither of them moved immediately. There is a particular emotional physics to goodbyes with people you have only just found, a reluctance that has nothing maudlin about it. Just the clean, clear pull of something real refusing to be easily set down. "Saturday," Eli said. "Sinclair Road, 9 a.m. Marcus held his gaze. "Or I can text you the address. If your phone survives charging." "When my phone survives charging?" "Reasonable amendment." A passenger boarded the train further down the platform. A recorded announcement said something in the calm, gender-neutral voice of transit systems everywhere. Eli turned to face Marcus fully. In the early morning light, that particular blue-gold light that exists only in the first hour before sunrise, Marcus's features were clear and quiet, and, Eli thought, extraordinary. Not in a symmetrical magazine cover way, in the way of someone who had lived in their own face honestly, who carried their history without hiding it. "Thank you," Eli said. "For the tea, and the eggs, and—" He gestured vaguely at the entire night. "All of this." Marcus's expression shifted into something softer. "Thank you for missing your train." A beat. Then Eli, who was not usually a bold man, who had spent years moving through life with careful smallness. Eli stepped forward and pressed his lips to Marcus's cheek. It was a brief kiss. Warm, deliberate, unhurried. He felt Marcus go very still. When Eli stepped back, Marcus was looking at him with an expression he hadn't shown before, open in the way of someone who has been surprised into honesty, who has been reached past their careful composure and found not defense, but tenderness. "Saturday," Eli said again, softly. "Saturday," Marcus confirmed. His voice was lower now. Eli boarded the train. He found a window seat, and as the 5:15 pulled out of Alderton Cross Station, he looked back through the glass. Marcus was still on the platform, watching the train go, hands in the pockets of his uniform jacket, the station's lights bright around him against the dawn-blue sky. He raised one hand. Eli pressed his palm flat against the glass, and then the train curved into the tunnel and Marcus was gone. And Eli Navarro sat back in his seat and looked at the ceiling and breathed and felt, in every cell of his body, with complete and astonished certainty, alive. 3 days later. The farmer's market on Sinclair Road ran along a pedestrianized street lined with plane trees that were, in late October, going out in spectacular golden style. The air smelled of roasted nuts and bread and the particular freshness of a clear autumn morning. Eli arrived at 8:58. He'd been ready since 7:30, which he was choosing not to examine too closely. He was wearing his better jacket, charcoal wool, a Christmas gift from 2 years ago that he'd been saving for an occasion that had taken until now to arrive. His phone was charged. He had downloaded a new playlist on the train over, something with the energy of anticipation, of stepping toward something. He stood near the market entrance and watched people arrive with canvas bags and small children and dogs of excellent breeds. And he thought about the night at Alderton Cross with the particular clarity that follows something which has settled into you properly. Not a fever, but a warmth that doesn't dissipate. He'd thought about Marcus every day since Thursday, not obsessively, not anxiously, just the way you return, repeatedly and with pleasure, to a song that got under your skin correctly. He'd thought about the way Marcus listened, the way he'd made eggs without ceremony, the way he'd said, "I think I confused being chosen with being known," as though he had arrived at that understanding through real terrain and was offering it freely. He'd thought about the cheek kiss, had replayed it approximately 47 times. Each time arriving at the same conclusion, he did not regret it. His phone buzzed. "I'm near the bread stall. There is a dog here that I believe is professionally beautiful." Eli laughed out loud. A woman with a canvas bag glanced at him with the mild curiosity of strangers. He typed back, "On my way. I will evaluate the dog." He found Marcus at the bread stall. Marcus was out of uniform, dark green jacket, dark jeans, a burgundy scarf that suited him with the natural effortlessness of someone who dressed well without thinking about it. He was crouched down, letting a golden retriever sniff his hand with the patient generosity of a person who genuinely liked dogs. He looked up when Eli approached, and his face did the thing it had done in the tile corridor. Opened, warmed, became fully present. "You made it," he said. "I made it." Eli looked down at the dog. "You weren't exaggerating. I told you." The dog, apparently satisfied with Marcus, transferred its interest to Eli with democratic enthusiasm. Eli crouched down beside Marcus and let himself be thoroughly inspected. Their shoulders touched. Neither pulled away. The dog's owner retrieved it with cheerful apologies, and they stood up, close together in the morning crowd. "You look well," Marcus said, studying him. "You got some sleep." 8 hours. "On an actual schedule, like a functioning adult." "Radical." His eyes were warm, amused. "Hungry?" "Always." They moved through the market together, not side by side with the careful distance of people still deciding, but with the easy proximity of people who have already decided and are simply enjoying the arrival. Marcus knew the market well. He had a rhythm with it, stopping at the stalls he trusted, introducing Eli to vendors with the confidence of a regular. They bought empanadas from a woman who argued good-naturedly with Marcus about seasoning and then gave him an extra one. They bought hot cider that steamed in the cold air. They stopped at a flower stall, and Marcus bought a small bunch of late-season dahlias, burgundy and gold, because, he said simply, they were beautiful, and sometimes you bought beautiful things just because they were beautiful. He handed them to Eli, who held them with both hands and looked at Marcus over the flowers with an expression he couldn't quite compose into anything more neutral than what it was. "Thank you," Eli said. "You're welcome," Marcus said, as though this were the simplest thing in the world. They found a bench near the market's edge, under a plane tree that rained gold coins of light around them, and ate their empanadas and talked about their weeks, about small things, about the elderly woman who brought her memoirs to Eli's print shop. Chapter 47 had involved a scandalous trip to Morocco in 1978, and Eli's co-workers had gathered around the printer. Marcus talked about a regular passenger, a teenager who took the late train every Wednesday, always with a library book, who had started nodding hello and once, last week, had said, "Your station is the best one," with complete sincerity. Your station. Eli noticed Marcus had smiled when he said it. "You really do love it," Eli said. "The work. I love what it represents." Marcus looked out at the street. Transition. People in motion. Everyone on their way to or from something important. He paused. "I think I find that meaningful. All the invisible weight people carry through those turnstiles." Eli was quiet for a moment, watching the market's gentle Saturday commerce around them. "I think that's why you brought me tea," he said. Marcus looked at him. "You noticed I was carrying something," Eli said. "You didn't know what, but you noticed, and you decided to sit with it rather than around it." The words landed with a quietness that felt important. Marcus held his gaze steadily. "Is that all right?" "It's more than all right," Eli said. I'm not used to it. That's all?" "I know." Marcus's voice was gentle. I could tell. Eli looked down at the dahlias in his hands. The flowers were slightly absurd and entirely lovely, and he was sitting on a bench in morning light next to a man who had made him eggs at 4:45 a.m. and brought him tea without being asked, and looked at him like he was worth the looking. He had spent years being loved in ways that missed him. This felt different. This felt specific. "Marcus," he said. Yeah. Can I ask you something? Always. Eli looked up. Thursday night, when you walked across that platform toward me, what made you bring 2 cups? Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the market, at the trees, at the light. Then he looked back at Eli with the slow, deliberate honesty that was simply how Marcus Reyes moved through the world. I don't know exactly, he said. When I saw you sitting there was something about it. You weren't panicked. You weren't on your phone complaining. You were just sitting with it, accepting it. And I thought, that's a person who could use company. He paused. And I thought, a faint smile, I would not mind being that company. Eli felt the warmth of this spread through his chest. I'm glad you thought that, he said. Me too. The morning continued around them. The plane tree shed another scatter of gold. Somewhere nearby, a child was demanding to pet every dog in sequence. The cider had gone from steaming to merely warm, and neither of them had finished it because they were talking, and the conversations kept moving into new rooms. Around 11 a.m., they walked the full length of the market and back. They discovered that they did, in fact, have opposing theories about sofrito, a disagreement conducted with the passionate specificity of people who both cared genuinely and found the arguing unexpectedly enjoyable. They agreed to a cook-off to be determined. Marcus said this with the mild smugness of someone utterly confident in the outcome. Eli said, "We'll see," with the serene composure of someone equally confident. They stopped at a second-hand bookstall, where Marcus spent 4 minutes in serious contemplation of a novel's back cover before buying it. He handed it to Eli. "You'll like this." Eli looked at it. The folded map by a name he didn't recognize. He read the first paragraph standing there at the stall and looked up to find Marcus watching him. "Yeah," Eli said. "I'll like this." They had lunch at a small cafe off the market's edge. Soup, bread, the unhurried kind of midday meal that stretches naturally because neither person wants it to end. They talked about their families, the complicated geometries of being queer in families that loved imperfectly. Marcus talked about his mother with a grief that had grown into something more like understanding. Eli talked about his sister, who was 3 years younger and had been, quietly and consistently, the person in his family who actually asked how he was doing and meant it. "She sends me care packages sometimes," Eli said. "Random stuff, a good pen, a book she liked, tea bags," he smiled. "Expensive tea bags. She knows I'll actually make them." "She knows you," Marcus said. "She does. That matters," Marcus said quietly. "Having even one person who does." They looked at each other across the small table. The soup bowls cleared away. The afternoon now arrived, and October light filling the cafe windows with a golden, slanted quality. He knows me, Eli thought, with a surprise that was almost physical. He's known me for 3 days, and he already sees more than people who've known me for years. The thought arrived with an ache, not a painful one, but the kind that comes from longing long carried finally being met. Outside the cafe, the afternoon air was crisp and smelled of autumn and bread and distant rain. They stood on the pavement without the usual social mechanics of ending a date. No phone checking, no vague mentions of things to do. Marcus turned to face him. "I want to keep doing this," Marcus said. Directly, with no preamble. Eli held his gaze. "Having arguments about sofrito?" "That," a pause. "And everything else." Eli breathed in the October air. He thought about Platform 4 in pale yellow light, and tea in a cold hand, and eggs at 4:45 a.m., and the mosaic wall with its centuries of arrivals and departures, and a slow smile at sunrise, and the warm, particular feeling of being seen, truly, specifically, without condition. He thought about the 40 years those two people had held hands, Like time didn't wear it down if it was real. He stepped forward, and this time, it wasn't a cheek. Marcus's hand came up and settled at the curve of his jaw, warm, steady, unhurried. And the kiss they shared was slow and genuine and entirely itself. Not a first kiss performance, but the kind that already knows it won't be the last. The kind that feels like recognition. When they stepped back, Eli's eyes were bright. Marcus's were too. "Saturday," Marcus said, quietly, as though the word had become their private shorthand for again, and again, and again. "Saturday," Eli agreed. He walked home through autumn streets holding dahlias and a paperback novel, and he felt, not the sharp, temporary glow of infatuation, but something stiller and more durable, something like arriving. He got home and put the dahlias in a glass of water on the kitchen windowsill, where they caught the afternoon light. He texted his sister. "I think something good is happening," she replied. 40 seconds later, "Tell me everything," he smiled. He would. But first he stood at his kitchen window for a long, quiet moment, looking at the dahlias, burgundy and gold, and he thought about transit systems at rest, and spaces between where you were and where you're going, and all the things that can happen in a threshold if you're paying attention. He thought about Marcus Reyes, who brought tea to strangers and made eggs at 4:45 a.m. and bought flowers simply because they were beautiful, and who moved through the world with a steady, unhurried grace that made everything around him feel more possible. He thought, "I missed the last train," and then, with a feeling so warm it was almost laughter. Thank God. The couple who visited Alderton Cross on a Sunday, the ones who'd met there 40 years ago, came back again in spring. It had become, apparently, a tradition. Marcus was working the afternoon shift that day. He photographed them again on the platform, still holding hands, still entirely natural about it, and this time there was someone beside him, a man with faint ink stains on his left hand, who smiled at the two of them with the expression of someone who understood, in his own particular way, exactly what 40 years of choosing someone actually looks like. They walked home through a city that was warm and greening, and they argued about sofrito the whole way, and it was, Marcus thought, watching Eli make his case with charming, categorical wrongness, absolutely perfect.